I thought my life was over when I spilled coffee on the most powerful man in the city. Little did I know that clumsy moment would change everything. Because sometimes the person who treats you worst when you have nothing becomes the one who gives you everything when they discover who you really are. But before we dive into this incredible story, hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and subscribe for more amazing real-life stories that will restore your faith in destiny. My name is Sarah, and 6 months ago I was drowning. Not literally, but in every way that mattered. I was 24 years old, working 14-hour days at Romano's, this fancy downtown restaurant where the cheapest appetizer cost more than I made in tips on a slow night. Every morning I drag myself out of my tiny studio apartment, look in the cracked mirror, and wonder how much longer I could keep this up. You see, I wasn't supposed to be a waitress. 3 years earlier, I was an art student with big dreams and even bigger student loans. But when my grandmother got diagnosed with diabetes and couldn't afford her medications, someone had to step up. That someone was me. I dropped out of school, sold my easel and paints, and started slinging plates to pay for her insulin and doctor visits. My grandmother always told me it was temporary. "Just until I get better, sweetheart," she'd say, patting my hand with her frail fingers. But we both knew better. Her condition was getting worse, not better, and the medical bills kept piling up faster than I could pay them down. That Friday night in March started like any other nightmare shift. We were understaffed because 2 servers had called in sick, and the kitchen was backed up because our head chef had quit the week before. I was running on my 3rd cup of coffee and maybe 4 hours of sleep from the past 2 days combined. My feet were killing me, my back ached, and I could feel that familiar burning sensation behind my eyes that meant I was about to cry from pure exhaustion. But I couldn't cry. Not at work. Not in front of the customers who looked at me like I was invisible anyway. So I kept moving, kept smiling, kept pretending everything was fine when really, I was falling apart from the inside out. Then it happened. Table 12 had been particularly demanding all evening. The man sitting there was impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent. He had this air about him like he owned the world and everyone in it. He'd sent back his steak twice, complained about the wine temperature, and snapped his fingers at me like I was some kind of servant dog. I was carrying a fresh pot of coffee to refill his cup when my exhausted legs finally gave out. Maybe I tripped over my own feet, or maybe my body just decided it had had enough. All I remember is the world tilting sideways, the hot coffee pot flying out of my hands, and then the sound of expensive fabric meeting scalding liquid. The entire restaurant went silent. I mean, dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop as I scrambled to my knees, frantically trying to clean up the mess with my apron. "I'm so sorry," I kept repeating, my voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. Please let me help you. I can pay for dry cleaning, I can." That's when he spoke. His voice was cold, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he asked, standing up slowly. The coffee had stained his white shirt and expensive jacket, and his eyes were filled with a rage that made my blood freeze. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm Marcus Chan," he said, like that should mean something to me. And apparently it did mean something to everyone else because I heard gasps from other tables. "I could buy this restaurant with my lunch money. I could buy 10 restaurants like this." He called over my manager, Mr. Peterson, and said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "If this incompetent waitress is still working here by the time I finish my dessert, I'll make sure every food critic and business owner in this city knows exactly what kind of establishment you're running. Do I make myself clear?" Mr. Peterson didn't even hesitate. He looked at me with disappointment and said the words that would haunt me for months. "Sarah, you're fired. Clear out your locker and leave immediately." I don't remember walking to the back room. I don't remember cleaning out my locker or changing out of my uniform. I just remember sitting in my car in the parking lot, crying so hard I couldn't breathe, knowing that I had just lost the only income keeping my grandmother alive. The next few weeks were hell on earth. I applied everywhere: restaurants, retail stores, coffee shops, even fast food places. But somehow every interview ended the same way. "We'll call you," they'd say, but the call never came. It was like I'd been marked with some invisible scarlet letter that screamed, "unemployable." I found out later that word travels fast in the service industry. Marcus Chen's public humiliation of me had spread through social media, and apparently, no one wanted to hire the clumsy waitress who destroyed a billionaire's suit. The video of that night had gone viral, but not in a good way. The comments were brutal. People called me stupid, worthless, a walking disaster. Some even said I deserved to be homeless. And homeless was exactly where I was headed. The eviction notice came 3 weeks after I lost my job. Bright red letters that might as well have been my death sentence. I had exactly 30 days to come up with 2 months' rent plus late fees, or my grandmother and I would be living in my car. That's when I started selling everything. My art supplies went first: the brushes, canvases, and paints I'd been saving from my art school days. Then my jewelry, what little I had. Then my books, my laptop, even my grandmother's old china set that she'd inherited from her mother. Each item felt like I was selling a piece of my soul, but what choice did I have? My grandmother tried to stay strong for me, but I could see the worry eating her alive. She'd sit in her wheelchair by the window, staring out at nothing, and I knew she was blaming herself. "I should have died years ago," she whispered one night when she thought I was asleep. "Then you could have had your life back." I pretended not to hear her, but those words broke something inside me that I didn't think could be fixed. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, something impossible happened. I came home from another failed job interview to find my grandmother crying, but these weren't tears of sadness. She was holding a letter, her hands shaking so badly she could barely read it. "The medical bills," she whispered. "Someone paid them. All of them. Every single one." I grabbed the letter from her hands, sure there had to be some mistake. But there it was in black and white. An anonymous benefactor had contacted the hospital, the pharmacy, and every doctor's office we owed money to, and had paid everything in full. We're talking about over $50,000 in medical debt gone overnight. The letter was simple, typed on expensive paper with no letterhead. It just said, "Every person deserves compassion and care. Your medical expenses have been taken care of. Focus on healing and moving forward." I should have been relieved, but instead I felt suspicious. Who just pays a stranger's medical bills? What did they want in return? I'd heard too many stories about good deeds that came with strings attached, and I wasn't naive enough to believe in fairy godmothers. But that was just the beginning. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one was from the art school I'd dropped out of 3 years earlier. They were offering me a full scholarship to return and complete my degree. Not just tuition, but living expenses, art supplies, everything. The letter claimed I'd been selected based on my exceptional talent and dedication to family, and that an anonymous donor had specifically requested that the scholarship go to me. My hands were literally shaking as I read it. This was my dream, everything I'd given up, being handed back to me on a silver platter. But by who? And why? I called the school's financial aid office, but they couldn't tell me anything about the donor. "All we know is that it's someone with significant resources who believes in your potential," the counselor told me. "They've asked to remain anonymous, but they've covered everything for the next 2 years." I spent that entire night walking around my tiny apartment, trying to make sense of it all. This didn't happen to people like me. Good things didn't just fall from the sky. especially not after your life had completely fallen apart. There had to be a catch. There always was. But what choice did I have? My grandmother's medical bills were paid, and this scholarship was my only shot at having any kind of future. So I swallowed my pride and my suspicions and I said yes. Returning to art school after 3 years felt like stepping into someone else's life. The campus looked the same, but I felt completely different. Older, more tired, carrying the weight of everything I'd been through. My classmates were mostly fresh-faced kids who'd never had to choose between their dreams and their family's survival. I envied them their innocence. But slowly, gradually, I started to remember why I'd loved art in the first place. There's something magical about putting brush to canvas, about creating something beautiful out of nothing. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I spent hours in the studio, painting out all my anger and frustration and hope. That's when strange things started happening. My classmates began mentioning that they'd seen expensive cars parked near the art building. Black sedans with tinted windows that didn't belong in our little campus bubble. First, I didn't think much of it. Rich parents visited sometimes, board members, donors. But then Jessica, my studio partner, mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "There was this really well-dressed guy watching you paint yesterday," she said casually while cleaning her brushes. "He was standing by the window of the administration building, just staring at your easel for like 20 minutes. Kinda creepy, honestly." I tried to laugh it off, but that night I couldn't sleep. The next day, I paid more attention to my surroundings. And sure enough, there it was. A black Mercedes parked across from the courtyard where I liked to paint outdoors. I couldn't see through the tinted windows, but I could feel eyes on me watching my every move. The security guard, an older man named Frank who'd been working there for decades, confirmed my worst fears. "Oh yeah, that guy's been asking about you," he said when I finally worked up the courage to ask. "Wanted to know your schedule, what classes you take, when you're usually here." Rich fellow in an expensive suit. Said he was a potential donor interested in your work. My stomach dropped to my feet. A rich man in an expensive suit, asking about my schedule. Could only be one person, but it didn't make any sense. Why would Marcus Chun, the man who destroyed my life, be watching me from afar? What could he possibly want? I started keeping a journal of every time I spotted the car, every strange coincidence, every unexplained detail about my scholarship. The pattern was becoming clear. Someone with serious money and connections was keeping tabs on me, but their motivations remained a complete mystery. The final piece of the puzzle came from my painting professor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She'd been my mentor before I dropped out, and she welcomed me back with open arms. One afternoon, while critiquing my latest piece, she made a casual comment that changed everything. "You know, I had the most interesting conversation with an old student of mine a few months ago," she said, mixing colors on her palette. "He's quite successful now, runs some big tech company. He asked specifically about you, wanted to know about your work, your potential. I told him you were one of the most naturally gifted students I'd ever taught." "What was his name?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Marcus Chun. Brilliant young man, though I always thought he was a bit cold." "Why do you ask?" That night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except the impossible truth staring me in the face. Marcus Chun, the man who'd humiliated me, who'd gotten me fired, who'd basically ruined my life, was the anonymous benefactor who'd been helping me. But why? What kind of twisted game was he playing? I spent the next week following the black Mercedes whenever I spotted it. I know it sounds crazy, maybe even dangerous, but I had to know the truth. Finally, on a Thursday afternoon, I followed it all the way to downtown, to a gleaming glass tower with Chen Industries written in silver letters across the front. My heart was pounding as I walked through the marble lobby, past security guards and well-dressed business people who belonged in this world of money and power. I told the receptionist I had a meeting with Mr. Chan, and somehow miraculously she let me go up to the top floor. The elevator ride felt like it lasted forever. When the doors finally opened, I found myself in an elegant reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. And there, through the glass doors of a corner office, I could see him, Marcus Chan, sitting behind a massive desk, typing on his laptop like he didn't have a care in the world. I didn't knock. I didn't wait to be announced. I just walked right into his office, my anger giving me courage I didn't know I possessed. "Why?" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Why are you doing this to me?" He looked up, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across his face, surprise, maybe even fear. But then his expression went blank, that same cold mask he'd worn the night he destroyed my life. "I'm sorry, do we have an appointment?" he said calmly, like he didn't know exactly who I was. "Don't you dare pretend you don't remember me," I snapped. "I'm Sarah, the clumsy waitress who spilled coffee on your precious suit. The one whose life you destroyed for sport. And now you're watching me? Following me? Paying my bills? What kind of sick game is this?" For a long moment he just stared at me. Then something in his face cracked, and I saw him for what he really was. Not a powerful billionaire, but a man carrying the weight of enormous guilt. "Sit down," he said quietly. "Please." "I don't want to sit down. I want answers." He stood up from his desk and walked to the window, his back to me. When he spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I haven't slept properly in 6 months," he said. "Every night I see your face. The way you looked when you were on your knees apologizing, begging. The way you cried when you got fired. I've never done anything that cruel to another human being. So you decided to stalk me instead?" He turned around and I was shocked to see tears in his eyes. I tried to forget about it. I tried to pretend it never happened. But I kept thinking about you, wondering if you were okay, if you'd found another job. So I looked into it. I made some calls. And I found out that you couldn't get hired anywhere because of me. Because of what I did to you. The video of that night went viral, Sarah. You became a cautionary tale. And it was my fault. My anger was still burning hot, but underneath it I could feel something else, confusion, maybe even the tiniest bit of understanding. "So you investigated my entire life?" I asked. He nodded, looking ashamed. "I found out about your grandmother, about art school, about how you'd given up everything to take care of her. I found out that you weren't just some careless waitress. You were a talented artist who'd sacrificed her dreams for family. And I realized that I destroyed the life of someone who was already struggling, someone who deserved better. So you decided to play God instead? Fix my life from the shadows without even asking if I wanted your help." "I couldn't face you," he admitted. "I couldn't face what I'd done. But I couldn't live with the guilt either. So yes, I paid your grandmother's medical bills. Yes, I arranged for your scholarship. I've been watching from afar because I needed to know that you were okay, that you were healing, that I hadn't completely destroyed you." The room fell silent except for the sound of traffic far below. I studied his face, looking for any sign that this was all some elaborate manipulation. But what I saw was genuine remorse, the kind of pain that comes from knowing you've hurt someone innocent. "Mrs. Rodriguez was my professor too," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Years ago, when I was still learning to be human instead of just successful. She talked about you all the time after you dropped out. Said you had more natural talent than any student she'd ever taught. She was heartbroken when you left." He walked back to his desk and pulled out a folder, thick with papers and photographs. I hired a private investigator to find out what happened to you after that night. Not to hurt you, to understand what I'd done. And what I found broke something inside me. He opened the folder and showed me the contents. Photos of me walking to job interviews looking exhausted and defeated. Copies of rejection letters. Documentation of my grandmother's medical condition and our financial struggles. It was my life laid bare, cataloged like evidence in a trial. I saw how hard you were trying. How you sold your art supplies, your grandmother's dishes, everything you owned just to survive. I saw the apartment building you were about to be evicted from, the bills piling up. And I realized that I had taken someone who was already carrying the world on her shoulders and crushed her under the weight of my own cruelty. So you decided to fix it, I said, though my anger was starting to fade into something more complicated. I decided to try. I know it doesn't undo what I did. I know it doesn't take back that night or the humiliation or the months of unemployment. But I couldn't just do nothing. He closed the folder and looked directly at me. There's something else. Something you don't know. When I was looking into your background, I discovered that your art professor, Mrs. Rodriguez, she's been my mentor for over a decade. After I graduated, I stayed in touch with her. She's been trying to teach me about empathy, about using my success to help others instead of just accumulating more wealth. And she never knew it was me. That night at the restaurant, but she kept talking about this incredibly talented student she'd lost, how you'd sacrificed everything for your family. She showed me some of your old paintings, the ones you'd left behind when you dropped out. Sarah, your work is extraordinary. It's not just technically skilled. It's full of emotion, of life, of truth. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes, though I wasn't sure if they were from anger or something else entirely. I've been falling in love with your strength, he said quietly. Not watching you like some creepy stalker, but seeing how you've handled everything life has thrown at you. How you've taken care of your grandmother, how you've kept fighting even when everything seemed hopeless. How you've returned to art school and thrown yourself into your work with such passion and dedication. You don't even know me, I whispered. I know that you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know that you put your family before your own dreams without a second thought. I know that even after I destroyed your life, you didn't become bitter or cruel. You just kept trying to rebuild. I know that you paint with your whole heart, and that your paintings make me feel things I didn't think I was capable of feeling. The silence stretched between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to hold on to my rage because it felt safer than this vulnerable honesty. But another part of me was starting to understand something I hadn't expected. That Marcus Chan wasn't the monster I'd thought he was. He was just a human being who'd made a terrible mistake and been trying to fix it ever since. I hate that you did this without asking me, I said finally. I hate that you made decisions about my life, even good ones, without my consent. I hate that you watched me from afar like I was some kind of project or experiment. I know, he said. I'm sorry. I thought it would be easier for you if you didn't know it was me. I thought my guilt was my burden to carry, not yours. But it wasn't just your burden, was it? It was mine too. I spent months wondering who my mysterious benefactor was, feeling like I owed someone I'd never met. I felt guilty accepting help when I didn't know where it was coming from, or what might be expected of me in return. He winced like I'd slapped him. I never thought about it that way. I was so focused on trying to fix what I'd broken, that I didn't consider how it might feel for you to be on the receiving end of anonymous charity. And what about the watching? The following? How was I supposed to feel safe when I knew someone was keeping tabs on me? That was wrong. he admitted immediately. I told myself I was just making sure you were okay, but you're right. It was invasive and creepy and I should have stopped. I should have found the courage to face you months ago. I studied his face, looking for any hint of deception or manipulation. But what I saw was raw honesty, the kind that's uncomfortable to witness because it's so real. Tell me about your life, I said suddenly. Tell me why you were so cruel that night. Because the person sitting in front of me right now doesn't seem capable of that level of heartlessness. He was quiet for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was full of pain. I've been rich my entire life. Not just comfortable, obscenely, ridiculously wealthy. My parents died when I was 12, and I inherited more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. I was raised by nannies and tutors and financial advisors who all wanted something from me. That's sad, but it doesn't excuse. I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm trying to explain how I became someone who could treat another human being the way I treated you. When you're surrounded by people who only care about your money, when every relationship is transactional, when everyone wants something from you, you start to believe that's how the world works. That people are either useful to you or they're not, and if they're not useful, they don't matter. He leaned against the window, looking out at the city below. I built walls around myself so high that I forgot there were real people on the other side. I forgot that the waitress bringing my coffee was a human being with dreams and struggles, and a family who depended on her. To me, you were just an inconvenience. A problem to be solved by throwing money at it. But that night changed something. That night showed me who I'd become. And I hated it. I hated myself. The way you looked at me, the fear and hurt in your eyes. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing a monster staring back. We talked for hours. Not just about that night, but about everything, my dreams, his loneliness, my grandmother's wisdom, his regrets. Slowly, carefully, we began to see each other as real people instead of the roles we'd been playing in each other's stories. When the sun started to set outside his office windows, Marcus made me an offer that I'll never forget. I want to give you a choice, he said. I can write you a check right now for enough money to set you up for life. You can finish art school, take care of your grandmother, buy a house, whatever you want. And you'll never have to see me again. We can pretend this conversation never happened, and you can move on with your life completely free of any obligation to me. Or, I asked, though something in his eyes already told me what the alternative might be. Or we can start over. Completely honestly from the beginning. No secrets, no hidden motives, no anonymous benefactors. Just two people getting to know each other as equals. I'd like to take you to dinner. Not as your mysterious patron, but as Marcus, a man who wants to earn your forgiveness and maybe, eventually, your trust. I looked at him for a long time, this man who'd caused me so much pain and then tried so hard to heal it. 6 months ago, I would have taken the money and run. 6 months ago, I believed that people like Marcus Chun were incapable of real change, real growth, real love. But 6 months ago, I was a different person. I was someone who'd never been tested by real hardship, who'd never had to choose between survival and principles, who'd never seen how quickly life could fall apart and how slowly it could be rebuilt. I need time to think, I told him. Of course. Take all the time you need. I stood up to leave, but at the door I turned back. Marcus. Yes. Thank you. For the medical bills, for the scholarship, for giving me my life back. Even if you did it the wrong way, even if it was motivated by guilt, you saved my grandmother's life and gave me a future I thought was gone forever. That matters, even if everything else is complicated. 2 weeks later I called him. Not because I'd forgiven him completely. That would take more time, but because I'd realized something important during those 14 days of thinking. Everyone deserves a second chance, especially people who are genuinely trying to change. Our first real date was at a small coffee shop near campus. Nothing fancy or expensive. We talked like normal people, about art and books and childhood memories. He told me about the loneliness of growing up rich, and I told him about the pressure of being the only person standing between my grandmother and disaster. 6 months after that first coffee date, we had our first fight. A real, honest relationship fight about something completely stupid. I can't even remember what it was about now. But what I remember is that he didn't try to buy his way out of it or use his money as a weapon. He listened, he apologized when he was wrong, and he held me when I cried from frustration. A year after our first coffee date, Marcus funded my first art exhibition. But here's the thing. It wasn't charity or guilt money. It was a real business investment in an artist he believed in. The exhibition was called Second Chances, and every painting told the story of redemption, of people rising from their lowest moments to find hope again. The opening night was magical. My grandmother was there in her wheelchair, wearing the beautiful dress Marcus had bought her. Not as a gift, but because she'd mentioned loving it in a store window. Mrs. Rodriguez was there, crying proud tears as she watched her former student achieve her dreams. And Marcus was there, standing in the back, letting me have the spotlight I'd earned. But the most beautiful moment came when my grandmother pulled me aside near the end of the evening. "I have a confession," she said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "I've known all along who paid my medical bills." "What? How?" "Honey, I may be old, but I'm not blind. That boy has been in love with you since the day he met you. The night at the restaurant wasn't cruelty. It was fear. Fear of feeling something real for someone real. And everything he did afterward was love, even if he didn't know how to show it properly." "But Grandma, I've been praying for years for someone to help my granddaughter find both love and success. Sometimes God answers prayers in the most unexpected ways. As I stand here today, 2 years later, I can honestly say that spilling coffee on Marcus Chun was the best mistake I ever made. Not because it led to money or success, though it did lead to both, but because it taught us both something invaluable about being human. Marcus learned that real power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. He learned that love is about seeing someone's worth even when they can't see it themselves. And he learned that the best way to heal from causing pain is to dedicate your life to creating joy. I learned that people can change, that second chances are worth giving, and that sometimes the person who hurts you the most is the one who ends up loving you the best. I learned that my worth isn't determined by my bank account or my job title, but by how I treat others and how I choose to respond when life gets difficult. Our wedding is next month. We're getting married in the art studio where I first fell back in love with painting, surrounded by canvases that tell the story of two broken people who found healing in each other. My grandmother will walk me down the aisle, healthy and happy thanks to the medical care that gave her back her life. Marcus still runs his company, but now it's dedicated to supporting artists and funding scholarships for students who've had to choose between their dreams and their families. We've helped dozens of young people stay in school, and every graduation feels like a small victory against the kind of despair I once knew so well. What would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven Marcus or walked away? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Remember, sometimes our worst moments lead to our greatest blessings. See you in the next one.